From the Ticats Audio Network, this is Speaking with the Enemy.
Yes, it is a brand new episode of Speaking with the Enemy, and the Ticats getting set to take on the Ottawa Redblacks on Saturday. It is a 4 p.m. kickoff right here in Hamilton, and on the call in Ottawa, well, from Hamilton in Ottawa on TSN 1200 will be AJ Jakubec, who's with us now. And AJ, this is, I guess every game is a must-win for the Redblacks from here on out, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think that ship has sailed, to be honest, unfortunately. I mean, at 2-8, I'm a big fan of sportsclubstats.com, and it gives you the numbers of what teams need to do. And if Ottawa wins all 4 games, they're still under 50% to make the playoffs. So at this stage, it's about next year. It's about evaluating what you have. And I think in particular, you kind of want to evaluate what you have at the quarterback position. So that's been hard to do in recent weeks because the offensive line has had trouble holding up. But they've had a ton of injuries. I mean, it started really before the season when Alex Mateus retired, and his direct backup, the first round pick of the Redblacks in 2019, Alex Mateus, wasn't able to play due to injury, and so that immediately put them down 2 Canadian offensive linemen, and they've been struggling ever since. They've had a lot of injuries. Nolan McMillan looks like he's done for the season. Their American tackles have been going down left, right, and center. So 10 different games and 10 different groups that we've seen on that offensive line, and 7 different players have made their CFL debut on the offensive line this year. So it's been a struggle from that perspective. And, I think that's affected a lot offensively. They've used 4 different quarterbacks so far this year, and we could see a 5th this weekend. I mean, Caleb Evans is going to start, but Duck Hodges will be on the roster, ex-Pittsburgh Steeler, and that's generated some interest for sure. So, but bottom line, back to your question, for the Ottawa Redblacks, I think everything is about next year now and just evaluating and trying to build something toward 2022. Because even if they're to win out in 2021, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs.
Head coach Paul LaPolice was on your station earlier this week, and he said, Caleb Evans, he's got interceptions in multiple games, and 3 interceptions last week against Montreal. Were you surprised to hear Lapo kind of, I wouldn't really call it a vote of confidence, but to see him go with Evans again here in this matchup against the Ticats?
No, I think this is Duck Hodges has been in Ottawa for under a month now. So he's been learning the offense. He's been learning the Canadian game. And, in practice, he's been the number 3 guy. So he's not really getting any reps. Now this week, he's getting reps with the offense. I think he's learned the offense and picked it up quite quickly from, everything I've heard. So, to throw him right into the fire when you don't need to, I think just to have him on the roster is probably a good thing. And I'd be surprised, just given where they're at, if he didn't get a start or 2 down the stretch. But in the meantime, you go with Caleb Evans this week, and you've got Hodges as a backup on the roster. The biggest thing to me is, again, just how this offensive line holds up. If it holds up a little bit better, then I think, that at least gives the quarterbacks a fighting chance. But you don't want to throw Duck Hodges into a situation where he's running for his life right out of the gate. So that to me is the most important thing this week. And if they can get that sorted out, and it's not just about what you do on your own line, it's about different schemes and blocking, protection patterns that you've got, and just, play calling as well. And so if you give your quarterbacks a little bit more of a fighting chance, then I think, you should be able to at least evaluate what they can do. But the last thing you want to see is have Duck Hodges come in and make a CFL debut, and he's just running for his life.
Yeah, I shades of Johnny Manziel against the Montreal Alouettes a few years ago, where I think the first throw he threw of the game, or his first career throw in the CFL, was an interception. We're going to stick with quarterbacks here because another signing this week in Tom Flacco, the younger brother of Joe Flacco. Do you everything's for next year. I kind of get that. But do you get the sense that Paul LaPolice is going to play with different lineups? He's going to see different quarterbacks, or do you think he's got to stick with one hot hand through the final 4 games here?
I think we'll see Evans and Hodges the rest of the way. I mean, they just needed another quarterback, right? You've got 3 guys in the 6th game with Taron Christian, Matt Nichols, and Dominic Davis. And if you lose another quarterback, you don't want to see a situation. We already saw it once where 2 guys went down in the same game, and Nichols and Davis. And, that's a new rule in the Canadian Football League this year. Teams are, only dressing 2 quarterbacks. And I kind of think they should probably go back to 3, given what we saw earlier this year with Nate Bahar having to take the snaps to finish that game where Davis and Nichols both got hurt. So they just needed another quarterback in camp because, with the way the position is, you've always got to have, doesn't matter what the position is, you've always got to have one more guy available to you if you get some injuries. And as of right now, if they didn't bring in Tom Flacco, their margin of error is nil. So yeah, not surprised on that. It sounds like he had a pretty good camp in Saskatchewan with the Rough Riders. So, he could get an opportunity down the stretch, but I would think if he does, it would probably be because of injury rather than performance.
Speaking of injury, obviously a huge one of the most explosive players, one of the most fun players to watch in the CFL right now, in Devontae Dedmon. He's out. I mean, I feel for Redblacks fans because this seems like it almost seems unfair at this point. Every team is dealing with injuries, but you mentioned the 3 quarterbacks on the 6-game injured list. Then Devontae Dedmon. You mentioned the offensive line. I mean, I feel bad for Ottawa Redblacks fans. What's the conversation like around this team in the city right now? It's obviously this team that city loves a winner. We know how supportive those fans are, but you host a show, so what's the discussion around this team right now?
Yeah, I think everything's focused towards next year. I think there's an understanding that as long as there's hope that fans are going to come out. And it's been a tough goal. They've lost 23 of their last 26 games going back to 2019. So Devontae Dedmon is a player that, he's a special player, kind of like, what we've seen from Brandon Banks, right? One of the most electrifying players we've seen in the Canadian Football League in the last decade. With Devontae Dedmon, I mean, if he is able to return, and he's in a walking boot with crutches right now, so I don't know exactly what that means, but certainly he's nowhere near returning. So if he were to return this season and returns another kick return for a touchdown, whether it's a punt return, kick return, missed field goal, whatever, he'd set the record for fastest to 5 return touchdowns, which is Henry Gizmo Williams. He's got 5 in 18 games, and right now, he had 5 in his first 18. He ended up with 31 in his career, which is mind-blowing, considering number 2 on the list is Pinball Clemens with 8. But Devontae Dedmon's halfway to 8, and 4 and 14 so far, and just a player that every time he touches the football, we saw it last week as well against Montreal. I mean, he wasn't able to get a return touchdown, but he had 2 very long returns, and one that if the kicker didn't slow him down, he was clearly going to go all the way again. So every time he touched the football, it's one of those edge of your seat type of moments, because you always get the sense that he's one move away from going the distance. And the league needs players like that. The thing about the Canadian Football League that makes it special is, it's not just a 2-phase game. It's not just about offense and defense. Special teams is a big factor, especially with the return game. And when you've got players like that, long history in this league. I mean, seen it with Brandon Banks. You see it with, Stephon Logan, Chris Rainey, and you look at Pinball and Gizmo and Chad Owens and all the great return men we've seen. I think that's what makes the league so special, is just the excitement in that 3rd phase. And unfortunately for Devontae Dedmon, he'll have to wait a little bit longer to maybe try and break Gizmo's record.
Well, I say this as someone who enjoys sitting in front of the couch and watching football for several hours on Saturdays and Sundays. Every time I see a fair catch in a different league, it's just kind of like, it kind of just like drops my shoulders. So the one thing one of the most things I love about this league is the lack of fair catches on punting and the excitement, literally, like you say, every time a kick goes in the air. All right, there's been some negative here, injuries, all that stuff, 2-8 record, but what are some bright spots on this Ottawa Redblacks team? Maybe not even now, but bright spots you're watching in the next 4 games towards next season. Guys you've seen who have progressed, who might not be getting the attention they deserve. Are there any players like that jump out to you on this Redblacks team right now?
Yeah, I mean, all the issues are on offense. That's the reality, and it's the O-line. I mean, quarterback's been an issue. We did see a couple of really good games from Caleb Evans, the win over Edmonton where he had the 3 touchdowns and no interceptions. So I think there's some promise there with Caleb Evans. And you do have, some other bright spots on offense. Ryan Davis has had a pretty good rookie season. So Nate Bahar's had a real breakout campaign, a former first-round pick out of Edmonton that has, it's taken some time. He went to Carleton University and was a real good receiver there, but we're starting to see him turn the corner and become a real productive Canadian receiver. The strengths of this team, though, to me, this is the best, and you could probably say this over the course of, Bob Dice's tenure in Ottawa. He's, the lone holdover amongst coaches from the Rick Campbell era. And, ever since he arrived in 2016, special teams has been a strength and always amongst the best in the CFL. You have, Lewis Ward, who's still, he's the most accurate kicker in the history of the CFL, and he's missed 2 this year, so he's right around 90%. Richie Leone leads the league or is right at or near the top of the league in so many different categories. I mean, pinning opponents inside the 10, net punting, average punting. He's been sensational. The cover teams have been really good, and we talked about Devontae Dedmon. So for me, Ottawa special teams have been the best in the league, and defensively, there were back-to-back games when they're a little bit banged up in the secondary, when they didn't have Abdul Kenna and Sherrod Baltimore, where they struggled and they gave up 51 to Montreal and 45 the next week in BC. But other than that, the defense has held Ottawa in football games, and they're making plays. Kenna's got 3 interceptions. Brandon Dandridge has 3 interceptions. You look at this linebacker unit with Avery Williams, who's going to be back and healthy again this week, and Micah Awe, and those guys. That's as good a duo in the league in terms of middle and weak side linebackers. So there's a lot of positives on the defense for sure, and special teams is amongst the best in the league. But unfortunately, the offense has really, really struggled, and that's why this team is 2-8.
AJ, in my 6 years of covering Hamilton sports, I think this is the longest we've gone without seeing each other in person, having last seen you at the bubble at the Island Games in PEI. So let me just say I'm very much looking forward to seeing you in person at the stadium on Saturday. I appreciate you doing this, but looking forward to seeing you, buddy.
Yeah, you too, Louie. Excited for the weekend for sure, and hopefully we get a pretty good game.
Well said. This has been Speaking with the Enemy. Make sure to join us at 4 p.m. for the kickoff, 3 p.m. for Tiger Cats pregame, right here on the Ticats Audio Network.
Speaking with the Enemy, dropping twice weekly before every Ticats game. Like and subscribe to get inside the enemy's head.